Welcome everyone. My name is Karlsson. I'm Vice President in the Global Strategic Networks groups at Elsevier. I've been part of Elsevier's work around sustainability science, disaster science, gender, as well as on AI. Prepared this session together with my colleague Yuri Shisaki. I will here introduce the session, which is entitled Strengthening Science and Technology for Better Response to Societal Inequalities, Disruptions and Emergencies. The session will look into the various aspects of risk control, response and recovery in the face of a disaster, with a particular focus on gendered aspects. Society is facing many challenges. With COVID-19, we're in the middle of a global crisis, not only affecting global health, but also the underlying social fabric of economy and international trust. We're also experiencing a global climate crisis. Climate change is amplifying extreme weather. We have heat giving rises to wildfires from California, in Australia to Siberia. We have floodings in China and Japan, and typhoons are getting stronger. Crises and disasters, be it pandemics or extreme weather, do not affect the population equally. Putting a gender lens on disaster risk reduction in risk control, response and recovery will allow us to better support the overall societal response to such disasters. And in doing so, we leave no one behind. This session aims to explore the gender aspects of disasters and our responses to them. Disasters, including pandemics, affect men, women, and different age groups differently. To give just one example, in Indonesia, 77% of the casualties from the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami were women and children. The joint collaboration between the United Nations Office of Disaster Reduction, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, and UN Women identified some key obstacles to address gender aspects of disaster risk reduction. Lack of data and gender analysis, lack of women participation and leadership, insufficient investments to address gender inequality, and a lack of political prioritization. And we are now starting to see how COVID-19 might be affecting women and men different too. Here are just a few recent media headlines. Why is Elsevier hosting this session? As an information analytics business in science and health, we support researchers, educators, clinicians, and policymakers in their daily work. To give 3 examples how we support SDGs and disaster science. 1, through our primary publication of relevant research, such as in the Lancet, in Cell Press, or in many other journals. 2, through our work on analytics to understand the research landscape, be it on disaster science, on AI, on SDGs, or on gender. And 3, through a number of partnerships, many of them via the Elsevier Foundation, one of them being the support to the gender summits. Allow me to also highlight the Gender and COVID-19 Mendeley Group, a public group on our open platform Mendeley, which was spearheaded by one of our speakers today, Dr. Rosemary Morgan. And the site has accumulated over 500 resources on the topic. Now, let me introduce our speakers for this session. More details on their profiles are available on the Gender Summit website. Tansri Dr. Jemaila Mahmood is the Special Advisor of Public Health for the Prime Minister of Malaysia since April 2020. She returned to Malaysia after her role as the Undersecretary General for Partnerships at the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. and she has also in the past held posts at the United Nations. Dr. Rajiv Shah is professor at the Graduate School of Media and Governments at Keio University, Japan. He's also senior fellow at the Institute of Global Environmental Strategies, IGS in Japan, and a former executive director of the Integrated Research on Disaster Risk, which was a decade-long research program at the International Science Council. He was also the chair of the United Nations Science Technology Advisory Group, STAG, for disaster risk reduction. Dr. Takako Izumi is an associate professor at Tohoku University's International Research Institute of Disaster Science, IRIDES, also in Japan. She is also the director of the Multi-Hazards Program at the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, APRU. And prior to joining Tohoku University, she spent 15 years working with different NGOs and at agencies within the United Nations. Dr. Jocelyn Clark is an executive editor of The Lancet and also an adjunct professor of medicine at the University of Toronto. She has held several editorial positions in the past, including executive editor at Public Health Research Organization, ICDERB, as well as senior editor at PLOS Medicine. In 2014, she was named among the top 100 women leaders in global health. And in 2018, she founded the first ever Canadian Women in Global Health list. Finally, Dr. Rosemary Morgan is an assistant scientist at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in the Department of International Health. She's a co-PI on a project supported by the Gates Foundation, which explores the gendered effects of COVID-19 in several countries. She's also advisor on a CIHR-funded project exploring the gendered effects of COVID-19 in Canada, the UK, China, and Hong Kong. And she coordinates a gender and COVID-19 working group. Let me briefly mention the topics that will be covered in this session. Jemaila Mahmood will give a broad overview on how the current pandemic is affecting society and address the need for data to move forward. Rajiv Shah will give a detailed overview of biological hazards in disaster risk reduction and highlight how gendered aspects enter both in terms of the current pandemic, but also beyond. Takako Izumi will look at how COVID-19 and the preparedness of higher education institutions have been, and she will provide insights on gendered aspects of disaster response in Japan. A lot of the frontline discussion is taking place in academic journals. Jocelyn Clark will provide insights on how The Lancet works on gender equity, as well as to provide some early insights from the pandemic. Finally, Rosemary Morgan will provide insights on why gender perspectives in the pandemic response and the need for disaggregated data if we are to exit from this pandemic being able to be better prepared for next time. In other words, to build back better. To briefly summarize, this session aims to put a gender lens on the current pandemic, provide some concrete examples of gender aspects of disaster risk reduction, and to give a concrete example how an academic publisher, in this case The Lancet of Elsevier, works to support gender equity and how COVID-19 has impacted academic publishing. Finally, some housekeeping tips. All the speakers have pre-recorded the presentations so they can be viewed at any time, also separately in any order. We also highly encourage you who are listening in to leave any questions or comments in the comments section. I will try to reply to these. Well, with this, we hope we have organized this together. This session will provide some useful insights moving forward. and so we as a society are able to build back better. Thank you very much.